Hey there, and welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping into something huge, a complete ground-up reinvention of India's labor laws. We're talking about untangling a system that's been in place for decades, with many rules that are, believe it or not, leftovers from the colonial era.
And that really brings us to the big question, right? Why now? Why go through the massive effort of replacing laws from the 1930s and 50s? Well, the simple answer is that the way we work has completely changed, and that old, fragmented system just wasn't built for today's world.
So, let's get right into it. The absolute core of this whole thing is simplification on a massive scale. Just try to picture untangling a giant, knotted mess of 29 different, often conflicting central labor laws. Well, that entire complex web has now been smoothed out and streamlined into just 4 straightforward codes. This is the bedrock of the entire reform.
So, here's our game plan for this explainer. First, we'll get the big picture of the overhaul. Then, we'll look at what's being thrown out. After that, we'll dive into what this new deal means for workers, see how the system gets easier for employers, and finally, we'll talk about what's next.
All right, first up, India's big labor law overhaul. The mission statement here is pretty ambitious. It's all about building a future-ready workforce for what the government is calling a self-reliant nation, or Aatmanirbhar Bharat.
The whole structure rests on these 4 new codes, which cover everything from wages and industrial relations to social security and workplace safety. The big idea is to move past these really outdated rules, get India's labor system in line with global standards, and, create a setup that actually works for both employees and businesses in the 21st century.
Okay, let's move on to our next section, out with the old. To really get why these new codes are such a big deal, we first have to understand the mess they're trying to clean up. We're talking about a shift from colonial-era complexity to modern-day clarity.
Okay, this is a huge one. Probably one of the biggest changes is the expansion of the social safety net. The old system, well, it only covered a fraction of the workforce. The new system aims for universal coverage, and for the very first time, it's bringing in millions of gig and platform workers. Thanks delivery drivers, freelancers, they're now in the system.
And it's not just about long-term security, it's about your paycheck right now. Before, minimum wages were only for specific industries, which left a ton of people out. The new code on wages makes a minimum wage a legal right for every single worker in the country. The goal is pretty simple: financial security for everyone.
Now, this is a landmark change for gender equality. Seriously, the old laws literally stopped women from working night shifts or in certain fields, like mining. Under the new codes, those restrictions are gone. Women can now work in any sector they choose, as long as they consent and their employers put the right safety measures in place.
So, with all that old stuff cleared away, let's turn to our third section, a new deal for workers. So who exactly wins with these new codes? Let's break it down. For the first time ever in Indian law, terms like gig worker and platform worker are actually defined. This is a massive step. By officially recognizing this huge, growing part of the economy, the law finally brings millions of people, your delivery partners, your cab drivers, your online freelancers, into the formal system where they can get benefits. And the benefits are really designed for the modern economy. Gig workers, they now get access to Social Security. For all you IT pros, your salary has to be paid by the 7th of the month, period. And for folks in creative fields like journalists and artists, you'll now get mandatory appointment letters, which means more job security and clarity. The codes are also specifically designed to empower women. Equal pay for equal work is now legally guaranteed. Having the option to work night shifts opens up jobs with higher pay. And get this, in a really culturally significant move, female employees can now add their parents-in-law as dependents for things like health benefits. And there's a real focus on protecting workers in some of the most vulnerable sectors. Migrant workers will now be able to take their benefits, like ration cards, with them from state to state. Plantation workers will get required safety training, especially for handling chemicals. And mine workers are now entitled to a free health checkup every year. So we've seen all the benefits for workers. Now let's flip the coin and look at the other side in Section 4, simplifying the system. This is just as important because a key goal here is to make it easier for businesses to grow by cutting down on red tape. For businesses, the new system is all about one-stop compliance. Instead of juggling multiple registrations, licenses, and filing a ton of different forms, it's all being streamlined. One registration, one license that works across India, and one single return. This is meant to take a huge administrative headache off their plates. There's also a big shift in mindset here. The The old role of the inspector is being changed to inspector-cum-facilitator. What does that mean? Well, the focus is supposed to move away from just catching people and punishing them, and more towards guiding and helping businesses to actually comply. Now, of course, some worry this might weaken enforcement, but the stated goal is more collaboration, less confrontation.
And that brings us to our final section, the road ahead. Let's zoom out one last time and look at the big picture impact these codes are supposed to have on India's entire economy and its workforce.
Just look at this chart. It tells a really powerful story. Back in 2015, only about 19% of India's workforce had any social security. Based on recent trends, projections show that by 2025, that number could jump to over 64%. These new codes are designed to accelerate that trend, casting the social safety net wider than ever before.
This quote from an official press release really sums up the intention behind this whole project. The claim is that these codes are built to put the most vulnerable workers, women, young people, gig workers, and migrants, right at the very heart of how labor is governed.
So as we wrap up, we're left with this big question. By taking a complex colonial-era system and simplifying it, by expanding Social Security, and by finally recognizing new-age workers, do these 4 codes truly signal a new era for India's workforce? The foundation has definitely been laid, but everything will depend on successful implementation and striking that tricky balance between industry and labor. One thing is for sure, the world will be watching.